You mentioned you're writing a book about the Black family. So I want to kind of wrap up by just asking you a couple questions about that theme. Most of my audience, are kind of white conservatives, many of them religious. What are the biggest misconceptions about the Black family? Or, what are some myths that, you could like set us straight on?
Well, I can let me start today, and then I'll work my way backwards in time. I think one of the biggest myths today is that I've seen this number: 75%, 85% of Black children are fatherless. I think that's a myth because it's just terribly imprecise. Right, 70% of Black children are born to unmarried parents, and that in and of itself is a sign of um, significant issues in terms of socially and culturally. But because a man and woman are not married does not mean that a child is fatherless. I can tell you just from my own observations, when we lived in DC, in a working class neighborhood, 35% of the pickups and drop offs at daycare and in my daughter's charter school were dads. Now, these are also kids who tended to be young. And what the research shows is that as children age, non-resident fathers there just tends to be some distance that comes with that. So they're less likely to play with, eat with, speak to, bathe, read books to their children every day as those kids get older. So I think we should speak with precision when it comes to these issues, right? Because a father can still be involved in the life of his child even if he doesn't live with that child. That being said, I think it's ideal when father, mother, and children are under the same roof, going back to what we were saying earlier in terms of the presence. So I think that's one myth. Another one, and I deal with this early in the book, is that slavery destroyed the Black family. Now, what I say in the book is that slavery, in many respects, particularly in this country, in some respects, defined the Black family because you have people who were transported from Africa from many different tribes who become amalgamated into a group and labeled Black or Negro at the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is no longer a man and a woman from a particular tribe in Angola or Benin or Nigeria. So in many ways, it defines the Black family. It certainly deforms the Black family because the institution of slavery and institution of marriage are two irreconcilable institutions. Marriage comes with the presumption that of cohabitation, so husband and wife under one roof, of monogamy and sexual exclusivity, of the husband's ability to protect and provide for his wife and children. And slavery makes all of those things impossible. So as a husband, you couldn't guarantee to your wife that she will be with you tomorrow because a slave owner could just sell you all apart, sell you to a different plantation 700 miles away, and you couldn't do anything about it. So it certainly disrupted the Black family dynamic. It deformed it. It didn't destroy it. And the reason I say that is because one of the first things you see after emancipation is men and women starting to put those family units back together. There's a series of ads that have been digitized in a project called Last Seen, which is out of Villanova University. And you can read ads of men looking for wives, women looking for husbands, willing to travel hundreds of miles to reconnect. And two generations after, or three generations after the end of slavery, by 1940, um, only about 83% of Black children are born to married parents. By the time you get to 1965, it was 75%, so it dipped a little bit. That was considered a national emergency, 1 out of 4 out of wedlock birth rate. By the time you get to the mid 80s, it crosses 50%. And by the time you get to the early to mid 90s, it peaks at 72%. And it's been at or around 70% for the last 25 plus years. So I would say, again, the myth that slavery destroyed the Black family is one that's fairly pervasive. And I counter that not because of sort of my own right leaning ideology, but just because I see how these forces, sort of interplay. I talk about 6 forces that actually did destroy the Black family. You have your big government paternalists who believe that Uncle Sam is a suitable husband and father for millions of low income women. You have your feminists, who I mentioned before, right? You have your abortionists dedicated to the destruction of the child. You have your LGBT activists who have been pushing to redefine first marriage and then man and woman, both in law and social custom. You have your functional atheists. This is where I critique a subset of the Black church, the more liberation minded subset of the Black church that traded biblical fidelity, particularly on this issue, for social justice. And then you have your anti racists, which are your Black leaders who have allowed this issue to fester and metastasize because they believe that the key to solving all of Black folks' problems is either bigger government or better white people. So these six groups, who I call the Sinister Six, I do argue destroyed the Black family by the traditional Black family structure, by defying God, displacing the man, deceiving the woman, destabilizing marriage, devastating children, and then dividing the home. So that is sort of the central theme of the book, and I obviously unpack that. The benefit: this is not just a book about complaining and pointing out problems. The second half of the book is how we rebuild that family structure and what that looks like moving forward into the next 2 to 3 generations.